Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this, the third webinar in the Institute of Interim Management's Summer 60 series. My name is Tony Evans. I'm the co-chair of the Institute, and I have the privilege of hosting today's event. With insights into winning assignments and what they look for in an outstanding interim, I'm delighted to welcome our three panelists today. And just to make sure that we stay on track technically, I'm grateful to my colleague Dominic, who is in our control room. Our contributors are Anthony Lewis from Tile Hill Partners, Alison Rotundo from Eton Bridge Partners, and Laurence Frantzis from Interim Partners, who have this last week or so relaunched as New Street Consultancy Group. These people have been voted by you, the interim practitioners, as the most effective professionals in their field in 2019-20. And it's very pleasing to have all three agreeing to participate in this event today. So the format is a Zoom webinar with broadly half an hour allocated to our panelists, and then the remaining time for questions and answers. Now, you'll find a question and answer button at the bottom of your screens, hopefully, and if you would like to ask questions as we go through, that's great. But what I will do is handle them at the end rather than disrupt the presentations at the time. For everybody's information, we are recording the webinar, so you all need to be on best behaviour, and we'll take the final edited version onto our YouTube channel in a few days. So really, without any further ado, I put names into a hat, and Anthony's came out first. So if he'd kick us off, please, with his thoughts on the topic for the day. Thank you very much indeed, Anthony.
Thanks, Tony, and hi, everyone. Firstly, I just want to say a massive thank you to all those that filled in the IIM survey this year. We're always really interested to see the outcome and the results that come through it, and we find it's a really good watermark for what's going on in the industry. So thank you for doing it. I think I'm the lucky one today in getting to go first. I think what I'm going to say is probably not rocket science. It's probably not going to sound revolutionary, so I'm glad I got to go first because at least I can claim it as my own idea. But I think what the IIM and Tony have asked us to talk about is, I guess, our views on winning assignments and then what makes an outstanding interim. So I've kind of made a few notes and bullet points that I'll kind of walk through now. But I mean, I think winning assignments, if I start there, I mean, one of the things that was quite interesting to see in the statistics that came out of this year's survey was the fact that 80% of interims use interim providers, but 66% of interims were contacted about opportunities by recruiters they already knew. That, for me, really emphasises the importance of the relationship you have with recruiters. I guess I'm kind of assuming the fact that you have filled in the survey, but also the fact that you're on this webinar now, that I think you value the Institute of Interim Management, that you value the role that interim providers play within that. But I think it's really important to make sure you've got firmly established relationships with a handful of good recruiters that are specialists to the area that you work in. For us, I think you're going to have your top tier of interim providers that you prefer, and it might be the names that have been ranked in the IIM survey, but it might be some outside of that. But you should really expect, and I think what we would say our standard out as an organisation, we want to build long-term relationships with you as individuals, but to get to know you so we can advocate for you with our clients. So be prepared for us to probe you, for us to really interview you thoroughly at first interaction, because that's the only way we can really kind of validate what you do and how you go about it, and therefore match you up with the right clients. So I think be prepared for that, be expecting it, and don't take it as kind of an interrogation. It is purely so we can get to know you well. Our job is not just to match words on CVs. Anyone can do that, I think. What it is for us to really understand you, to understand our clients, and to put you in touch. Outside of that, I think your well, we should only ever really supplement your network. We believe that actually you've got, you know, long careers, you've got successful careers, so there'll be people you've worked with through the course of time that you can go out and have conversations with. It's got a bit harder of late with travel restrictions, lockdown and the like, and going for a drink or a coffee is not quite as straightforward as it once was. But utilize the people that you already know. You know, you're not going cap in hand asking for a job. You're going out making sure that people know what your offer is, know that you're available, you know, from a certain date, or to at least network with people that they might know and see what's going on in the industry, so you can make sure that your offer is current and fresh. So I think once you've got your relationships with recruiters established, I tend to think they take care of themselves. We as recruiters will stay in touch with you with opportunities as and when they come up. So, you know, drop us a line, let us know what's going on, but you can then invest your time in building relationships or further relationships with people you already know. The other thing I'd say is approach it like a sales strategy. Yeah, as an interim, you're running your own business effectively, so you're going to want to have multiple routes to market. So, you know, we covered a couple there. First is recruiters. Second is going to be your own network. You're going to apply for jobs via our own websites. You're going to look on job boards. You're going to find things there. But beyond that, I think LinkedIn is such a powerful tool. And if you're not on LinkedIn, then I'd definitely recommend being there. It's a shop window. You know, you don't really need to be on it constantly. If you want to contribute to discussions, if you want to share pieces of thought leadership, then I think that's all brilliant for building brand. But as long as your email is linked to your LinkedIn so that people that get in touch can be, or you're responsive to, then I think you'll kind of build your network further and hear about opportunities that way. The other thing I'd probably stress is to trust your process. You know, once you've got into the rhythm of this, one of the things that, you know, most interims find hard is the gap between assignments. And once you're in the midst of an assignment and you're at the kind of the peak of the change program, whatever it might be, you're probably looking forward to those few weeks that you have off between assignments. So you're probably looking forward to the downtime. And then when it comes, you're panicked about where the next opportunity is coming from. So I always think trust the process, be structured about what you do on a day-to-day basis. Control the things that you can control. So, you know, what networking you're doing, who you're speaking to, the sales strategy that you're taking. But enjoy the downtime, because, you know, it doesn't come that frequently. And so, you know, if you've done a bit each day, you know you can go off and kind of pursue your own interests with relaxation, and that things will come back around. Then the other bit I'd say is research and clarity of proposition. You know, when you do get put in front of that client, it's making sure you absolutely nail that opportunity, that you kind of do the research ahead of time. This is where I think us as recruiters really earn our crust, because our job is to give you as much information as humanly possible for you to be a success in that interview. You know, there are times when we've literally got a one-word brief or a one-line brief, and we'll be honest with you in those situations, but really what we should be able to do is tell you about the priorities of the client, what sort of things that they're looking for, what the things that are motivating them, and for you to then make sure that you can pitch against that. So really kind of make us work for our money at that point. It's in all of our interests for you to do well. So if you don't feel that you've got adequate information, then you need to push us to provide that for you. And if we can't, then we should be honest rather than making it up, I think. You're within that kind of developer sales pattern as well. You know, the more interviews you do, the better that sales pattern becomes. You know, so we as Tile Hill specialise in working with the public sector. Primarily, that is local authorities. Often, you know, they're all unique organisations with their unique issues, but the things that put a smile on their face will be the same from place to place and person to person. So once you've got that interview style and technique and some of those answers well versed, I'd stick to them. Use the acronym STAR, so situation, task, action, result. If you frame most of your answers with those and have them practiced ahead of time, then I think you're going to be very clear, concise and accurate within the interview or the conversation you're having. The other thing I'd quickly mention is there used to be two types of interview. There's probably now three. One was the fireside chat. Second is the panel interview, and finally is now the video interview, which could be one of both of those things. But in each of those, I think you have to work really hard to make sure you can get across exactly what you can provide for someone. and you know, what value you create and how you can create value for others. And I think you will not always get answered or asked, sorry, the killer question that unlocks that from you. So again, in preparation for any interview or conversation, make sure you've got key points that you want to get across that you think are relevant to that client, that situation, and that individual. So there, I think, the things that I'll talk about when it comes to winning assignments. What makes an outstanding interim? I mean, I think it varies because there are so many different briefs, there are so many different things that our clients are looking for. But the one thing I'd really stress is being really clear on what your proposition is. Now, that could be something very niche, it could be very specialist within a sector, within a part of that sector, and within specific sorts of change programs. But it could be as broad as I'm just a really good manager and leader in turning around financial situations, or as a chief exec. So I think being clear on that proposition, knowing exactly what you do for organisations and how you do it, and finding a way to articulate that, I think, is really important when it comes to going to market for your next assignment, especially when it comes to kind of tight and challenging markets where jobs are fewer and further between. Don't start pitching for everything. You know, be clear on what you can do, and I think it becomes even more important at times like this, where, you know, the chance of an economic downturn and recession mean that interim opportunities might get fewer and further between. So be clear on what you do, focus it on the organisations that would benefit from that. The other thing I'd say is good interims are flexible, adaptable, and constantly learning. So, you know, kind of perversely, most of our clients are looking for you to be the solution to their problems. They're trying to buy a shortcut quite a lot of the time. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't constantly learn. You shouldn't reflect on how things have gone in assignments and adjust your approach for the next time. I think the kind of you're the perceived expert in the room, but don't perceive that you know everything. So each client will have its unique situations. We've got, you know, parts of the country we work with that if you say, oh well, we do it like this down in London, you know, you'll get the door shut on you. People don't want to hear what works in one place. They want to know what's going to make it happen for them. So I think, yeah, that constant learning cycle. I think be open to feedback, and I'd finish each assignment with trying to collect feedback on what you've done well, what could have gone differently. And whether that's in the form of a reference or just a conversation with your sponsor or your end client. The other thing that we're really passionate about is diversity of thinking and approach. So actually, how can you celebrate diversity of thinking within the organisations you're working for, but also in your own approach? So this builds on that constant feedback of learning. But you know, we're really proud to see in the public sector there's 40% of interims are female. We're not sure what the statistics are around kind of BAME representation. It's something that we'd like to encourage the IIM to include in the survey next year, because I think understanding the different experience, the cognitive diversity that interims can provide to an organisation from different backgrounds, I think is going to be really important moving forward. So I think, again, that's something that good interims will be able to do. They'll seek out that diversity of thinking in the organisations they're working for, and they'll put it on a platform. The other thing is then leaving a legacy, and this is my last point, and then I'll let the actual experts get on with this. But I think good interims will leave a legacy behind them. They will make decisions for an organisation that work in the short term, but also the medium to long term. And they should be fully appraised by clients of the impact of those decisions. You know, we constantly get feedback from clients about interims that literally just do whatever it takes to meet the short-term brief and to tick things off the list, but 6 months later the organisation's in ruin. I think being mindful of that, and I think making sure you're taking that long-term approach is really important. Making sure you're not a crutch to the organisation so that when you step away it all falls apart. So I think, again, find those individuals in an organisation that you can nurture, that you can develop, and you can pass knowledge onto. Be generous with that knowledge. You know, it might be intellectual property, but be generous with what you can provide to clients, because again, it's about the value you create for others. And then know when it's time to step away. Put your hand up, say, look, I think I've added my value here, and give the client the choice as to whether they want to keep you on. And sometimes they will, sometimes they really appreciate having you around, even if it feels like you're not adding as much value. But other times it will be the right time to step away. And I think that honesty and transparency is really important in an interim. And then if you're doing all of that, I'd say 4 to 6 weeks before you're due to finish your current contract, start looking for the next one. And hopefully, if you're doing all of the winning assignment stuff, it should all fit nicely. Yeah, they're my thoughts on it.
Thank you very much indeed, Anthony. It's a great start. Thank you very much. Second now, out of the hat, was Alison. So if you'd like to take on the challenge of following Anthony, that would be great. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Tony. Thanks, Anthony. And I will try and not repeat too much of what you said. I thought it'd be of value just very quickly to explain about Eton Bridge and my particular experience. So my expertise is I've worked in the finance recruitment field for over 20 years, but also within Eton Bridge, we cover HR, business transformation and technology, and board appointments as well. So whilst I'm sort of here chatting to you today, I have spoken to lots of colleagues internally. So hopefully this advice that I'm giving you is across the 4 practices that we cover. And again, like Anthony said, I wanted to take the opportunity to say a big thank you. If there's anybody on the call today that kindly voted for myself or Eton Bridge, and we really appreciate that. So if I start off with the first area, so our insights into winning assignments, I think I really looked at this a lot around the actual interview process. So what preparation that you need to do. And I suppose the initial thing is going to sound really basic, but in the current climate is to make sure prior to your interview that you're checking that your Zoom and Teams is actually working. I've had quite a few people miss out on opportunities because it didn't go correct for them on their given time. So make sure that you're prepared. Obviously have all your homework done on the company. So you've got questions prepared to ask. So you're demonstrating your interest. And again, like Anthony said, I mean, if I ever get given a job description, it's very, very, I'm really lucky. So you've really got to get the insight from the firm that's representing you on what are the most important things to that client. But also they should know that person well that's going to be interviewing you. So what are they like and how do they tend to interview and what typical questions do they ask? And really push back with the firm if they're not able to give you enough detail. What I tend to see at the level that we're recruiting in an interview is you're typically asked, if you got the job, what would be your approach? And they're looking for you to talk through, what are you going to do on day 1, week 1, month 1? What is your plan? I mean, an interim, in my mind, is really judged on their first 100 hours instead of their first 100 days. So really, you need to have thought about what is your unique toolkit and then tweak that accordingly, your plan to each opportunity for the interview. Again, like Anthony said, so many of my clients are looking at your LinkedIn profile as well as looking at your CV. So make sure it's updated, you've got a photo, you've got recommendations, and obviously any mutual connections that you've checked and that you can talk about that in the interview. And then just as a more general, I suppose broader, what our clients tend to look for and how that helps you win an assignment is getting across in the interview that you can be flexible, that you can put across a strong opinion, but in a sensitive way, that you can work in a very low resource environment. And at the levels that we're recruiting in interim roles, in contrast to permanent, the expectation is that you're still going to be really hands-on and you're into the weeds. So you must get that across in the interview that you're comfortable doing this. And then obviously you're someone that's very solution driven, and that you can get to know the key drivers of the business really quickly. So coupled with that preparation, I then thought about communication and trust. Now, on the trust side, whilst I appreciate you're probably not going to want to be really open with the firm in telling them all the other opportunities you're currently considering, it is really key that you get across your level of interest in a role and your commitment. Typically, if I've done my job well, the client will call me with feedback and say, oh, Alison, I can't decide, I like them all. And often I am ultimately making that final decision for the client. And I will naturally recommend that they run with the individual that I know is really committed and that I will trust that they'll see out the duration of that assignment. And then the other aspect that I wanted to pick up on about winning assignments is your personality. Again, when I'm given a brief on an interim role, a client will always say, I'm looking for this specific skill set, possibly this particular sector. But at the end of the day, my job is to know the client really well. And then also you as individuals, as interims. I will always put my reputation on the line when putting a shortlist across with at least one person that doesn't necessarily meet the brief, but I know when that client meets them that they're going to just click and get on. And I would say 90% of the time that person ends up getting the job. So don't be afraid to put your personality across, because in an interview for interim, often it's really quick and you've got a short period of time. So just try and get across your personality. So moving on to what I and Eton Bridge look for in an outstanding interim. And I suppose in contrast to Anthony, I've maybe looked at it more from what we at Eton Bridge would classify as an outstanding interim. So for us, it really starts with trust. We trust our clients, we trust our candidates, and we trust each other. So we're all on the same side. It goes without saying that, of course, ideally we're looking for someone that's been a professional interim, they've done a number of assignments in similar roles, so they can demonstrate sort of what are the pitfalls and you've seen them before. But really, a big element for me personally is on, I suppose, your behaviour. So interim roles, a lot of them are really tough. And obviously I'm in regular contact with people that are on assignment. And a lot of the time people aren't necessarily happy. But I think going into interim roles, that is an expectation that some are going to be harder than others. It's really important that you see out the duration of that assignment and that you've got that commitment level. The other thing for us is we look for people that haven't necessarily just done maybe three-month assignment, 4-month assignment, 2-month assignment. We're looking at the duration. We're looking at, have you been extended in a role? So when you're considering positions, take that into account, the duration. For us, yes, we're a firm representing you, but we really want to build a relationship. It's not just a transaction for us. There's a lot of people that I've known over the year, and I generally want to get that person a job. I want to help them. So it's really important through all your communications with a recruitment firm. It's going to sound really basic, but that you're polite. And that includes everyone that you deal with in that business. So secretaries, researchers, the finance team once you secure the role. So it's quite alarming sometimes when I speak to our research team, how they are spoken to in contrast to myself, and I trust their judgment completely. So it's key that you treat everybody in the same way. And again, an outstanding interim, references are key, naturally. If you've got any hard copy references as well, that's always really helpful. And then again, for us, an outstanding interim is once we've placed somebody in a role, that you keep in touch with us and vice versa. And then the other thing that we find a lot of our outstanding interims provide us with is referrals of people that they also know that are looking, because obviously it's really important for us to have people in our network that we know and trust. The other thing, Tony, did you want us to talk through the trends that we're seeing in the market?
If you want to take a couple of minutes to do that, I'm sure the audience would be very interested. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. Yeah. So, I mean, from a overall perspective, if I look in the field that I sit, finance, the number one role, so the CFO role, has been quieter, but all the direct reports have been relatively busy. So specifically within finance, we've been relatively busy within financial planning and analysis. So companies needing greater level of insight, looking at current and future trends. We've also been busy in technical sort of group accounting, group financial controller roles. That's probably due to half year and year end departments being overstretched and auditors looking for extra reassurance. We have been busy in cash resourcing, cash flow forecasting, so that treasury skill set, and we see that continuing. And specifically what we've seen within the private equity backed businesses, the funds have been quieter, so they haven't been making as many investments, but in this time they've raised additional funds, so they're itching to deploy. So all of the PE houses that I'm talking to are saying that sort of October onwards it should start to get really busy, so we anticipate M&A picking up. Our HR team explained to me that unfortunately, due to the current situation, they've been quite busy in the restructuring area. Also, their reward team has been busy because companies are looking at talent performance and they're reassessing what a good job looks like in light of change of all the new working patterns. And then within our business transformation and technology practice, I mean, ultimately, unfortunately, investment decisions have not been made. Companies are focusing more on today rather than tomorrow. So it's more on the day-to-day operations. A lot of programs have been paused or shrunk. The areas where they have been busier is around technology, ERP programs, automation, supply chain resilience, and they can see that really picking up in October and increasing. And then just from a senior leadership perspective, because I've been doing quite a lot of investigating and talking to various businesses in the market, what I'm starting to see is what people are going to look for is going to be different in future leaders in the market. And I've heard a couple of times called the 5 C's. So modern leaders moving forward are going to be expected to have more clarity, coaching, courage, creativity, and care. So it's moving more to a leader that has more empathy, higher emotional intelligence, still the ability to move very quickly and be resilient, but show more care and understanding. From a sector perspective, we're seeing healthcare, pharma, and tech be relatively buoyant. And we're also starting to think with the schools going back and when the furlough scheme stops, again, that will create more opportunities. So I think that's it. Thank you very much.
That's great, Alison. Thank you very much indeed. And I think you've done a really good job of not having to repeat pretty much anything that Anthony was talking about. So that's fantastic. Well done, you. Which puts a lot of pressure on Laurence now as the final person. What are you going to find now, Laurence, to talk to us about, which is going to be different? Away you go.
There is going to be some repetition, but hopefully it's just positive reinforcement. Thanks, Anthony. Thanks, Alison. Really, really good overviews. And I suppose I'd just start off with saying I completely agree with everything that you've said. And also, again, if I could just echo the gratitude that Anthony and Alison expressed, we put a huge amount of emphasis on customer service, and we value hugely the feedback that comes through the IIM. So for those of you who did take the time to either vote for us, vote for myself, or anybody else, taking the time to do the survey, we really appreciate it. So thank you very much. So I work for the business that was formerly known as Interim Partners, and last week we migrated over onto our new brand, the New Street Consulting Group, which is a blend of services that are provided to the within the human capital space. So it's predominantly very much still focused on the provision of interim managers. We also do executive search, and we have a division within the business that does leadership and talent consultancy as well. What I'm kicking off with here, and I am mindful of repetition, but in terms of what I'll stick to what I've prepared. The first thing that I talked about in terms of winning assignments was how markets have been impacted, and therefore how people might be able to allocate their time when thinking about where the opportunities might be. So depending on the function that you sit in, and depending on the specific skill set, be it a CEO, an interim managing director, or indeed finance, and so on and so forth, we've recently seen some good activity in the e-commerce space within the retail field. So any business that has a very, very high online presence, it won't surprise you to know that everyone's seen Amazon's performance, but underneath that, the more national businesses here in the UK, they're doing really well, and that's the space that we've invested quite heavily in. That doesn't just mean that you need to be a technical expert. You could be a logistics director, and so on and so forth. So there are opportunities there that we're seeing coming through. Defence has remained a very, very strong area for us. I think Alison mentioned pharmaceuticals. We've continued to do well in there, and food, and then construction and the home improvement, and in addition to that, the home improvement space. So we've by no means been untouched by this. Absolutely, the performance has been impacted, but there have been pockets of markets and pockets of examples that have gone particularly well. And therefore I would encourage people to be as open-minded and as agile as you possibly can. It might seem like a bit of a contradiction with what I say later, which is be a specialist, and I absolutely concur with what Anthony and Alison said in that regard. But it's in this marketplace right now, I think be as open-minded and be as agile as you possibly can within the sphere of your speciality, and that includes the sort of industry, but also where the role is, and the kind of thing that you might take on. And ultimately, it might not be what you want to hear, but in some cases, rates have been impacted as well. So I think in this marketplace right now, I would encourage you to, within the sphere of what you deem as acceptable, I would be as flexible as you can in that way as well. Networking, massive point, just to echo Anthony's thoughts on that. It's absolutely massive, and that isn't just about partnering with interim service providers. Going to networking events, shaking the tree of your own network, to play as an interim, to call yourself an interim and to be a genuine one, you will inevitably have had a very, very successful permanent career, and therefore you will have met excellent people along the way who have now dispersed and are working all the way across your industry, and you should stay in touch with those people regularly and let them know what you're doing and make sure they're aware of the fact that you are providing this service now. Always be, I use the phrase, and I'm going to apologise in advance for this because it is quite cheesy, but it does work. Always be hunting. So if you imagine a lion, I'm really sorry, a lion will eat when it's hungry. So a lion will eat a buffalo, and then 9 buffaloes could walk past in mini skirts dancing at the lion, and the lion wouldn't go anywhere near it because they're full. A hyena, on the other hand, a hyena would jump on it straight away and will eat again, or it will eat it and drag it and store it. And that, for me, I always use that analogy. As ridiculous as it sounds, an interim should always be looking and hunting, not to the detriment of the assignment that you're in, never to the detriment of quality of service to the client, but you should always be keeping your eyes open. You should always be looking around. You should always take the opportunity to go and meet somebody, even if it's for future reference, because you never know where things might lead to. Partnering with interim service providers, what I won't do is go into that in too much detail, because it has already been covered. But the one thing that I would reinforce is the importance of picking not just the business, but picking an individual who you can work with, you can trust, and deepen that relationship with that individual. It doesn't need to be one person, have 3 or 4, but that individual will think of you first whenever they have something relevant. If you can, and there's a bit of an art to this, and also you do have to kiss quite a few frogs, strengthen your network in private equity. They are busy. They hire interims. They are highly motivated to improve performance. They are under a huge amount of pressure to improve the EBITDA number, and therefore, if you can develop relationships either through your interim service providers or directly, it will eventually lead to something. It isn't guaranteed, and they know a lot of their own people, but they are prolific users of interims, as are consultancies. So if you're able to develop relationships with the likes of PwC and KPMG, we work with the PwC turnaround panel, for example, and it's very, very interesting to see how busy they've been in the last 6 months with different opportunities that have come their way, and also getting affiliated with the Institute for Turnaround as well, the IFT, which is a membership body that just I think it does really good things in that space. So hopefully that's a little bit of new stuff, and on to an outstanding interim. A lot of really good ground's already been covered, but what I would echo from Anthony is you are absolutely running a business with a specific service. You're not looking for a new employer, you're looking for new clients, and it's a totally different mindset. It's a totally different mindset. You bring a very different energy and a very different dynamic to a meeting with a client than you do if you're going and viewing them as your new employer. Now, good experienced interims know that, but that's probably one for the people who are just stepping into this. You need to, on the personal brand front, you need to look, feel, taste like a professional interim, a professional consultant, and that starts with how you market yourself on LinkedIn. That starts with the manner in which you present your CV, if you are using a CV as opposed to a portfolio of your work. And once you get that right, once you start to tell the correct story, you will build momentum, and then it's really important to have case studies of your work. It really surprises me sometimes the number of interims who I work with who've been working for maybe 10 consecutive assignments in a row. They've not been out of work for 5 years, and they don't have any pre-written case studies. They don't have anything that documents the outstanding stuff that they've been doing, and it really is so useful to us if we send a CV and a link to the LinkedIn page and a couple of case studies that show that they've done a similar project already in the past. It immediately gets the client's attention. It immediately gets their interests. So I can't emphasize enough how important it is to have case studies. Know who your references are, and if possible, again, it's a marketing thing, but if possible, get some recommendations on LinkedIn of interim assignments that you've done, or a change or transformation process that you led when you were in a permanent role, if you're newer to this, and have them on LinkedIn, so that when people take the time to look at you and look at your profile, they can see that this is the sort of thing that you've done before. How you contract with the client. So there's a number of different ways, and interestingly, no one's mentioned IR35 here. But one of the one of the really important ways that I'm not sure whether this is an outstanding interim or just an extremely organised, experienced interim, but I would encourage you to have a look at outcomes-based contracts. Now, a lot of people will be familiar with the statement of works contract or something of that ilk, and that really bounces off the points that Alison made really around, and I think Anthony actually, around having a plan. You know, any good interim should really should be providing this service for a client, but they should expect to plan ahead, and they should have a roadmap of exactly what it is that they intend to do. Now, inevitably, all best laid plans will hit obstacles and challenges, but having sensibly well structured contracts that have a very, very specific outcome in mind is best practice. And also it shows that you're going in to do something very, very specific, which immediately starts to move the conversation away from the IR35 conversation, which could be coming next year. Attitude, have an action mindset, a change management mindset, run towards a challenge. You know, I have some conversations with interims which are really interesting. I'm like, this company's in loads of trouble. They're losing money. They might be bust in 6 months. You wouldn't dream of having this sort of conversation with somebody if they were looking for a permanent role. But on the interim side, these are the sorts of things. These are the kind of opportunities that present you with the opportunity for work, and they also give you the opportunity to shine. So sprint towards those situations and do your research on which industries are struggling, because they undoubtedly will present you with opportunities. And yeah, I'll wrap up on the same point that Alison did, actually, that I have absolutely no doubt that as the furlough scheme is wound up over the next 2 months, it's going to cause a lot of people a lot of problems. A lot of companies are going to catch a cold, and that is really, really sad. It's a shame. And obviously we really wish that wasn't the case. Ultimately, off the back of that, I believe that the investor community, that the boards of these businesses, and the other decision makers, the owners and so on and so forth, will need to have a think about what they're going to do. And I highly doubt they'll want to bring people in permanently if they haven't got the expertise in-house. So rather than viewing it as Armageddon, I'm taking a slightly different narrative, which is it is going to be uncomfortable, but we hope that it means that we'll be able to do something to help the industry and help our interims find work. I think there was a bit of repetition in there, but I think I managed to get some new stuff in there as well.
No, it's brilliant, Laurence. Thank you very much indeed. Can I just say to all three of you two things? Firstly, I think you've all managed to be very additive each time, which is a tremendous effort. So well done. You've given loads of information and views to the people listening. That's fantastic. And secondly, you all seem to be in really quite synchronized agreement. There's been a lot of nodding from the two of you not talking at each time, being in sympathy, I think, with what that current speaker is doing. So that adds, I think, a great deal of weight to what's being said. So thank you very much for that. I'd like to move us on, if I may, to questions. We've got a range of questions being asked, and what I'll try and do is give a question to each of you to start off with, and then we'll go round, if that's okay. Perhaps if I do them in an order here. There's been a question asked about what kind of CV presentation best suits the interim market as an interim manager, and can you have more than 10 or more assignments? Is it better to have a 2-page CV or a fully detailed one? So Laurence, you commented about the CV, so would you like to kick us off on that?
Yeah, with pleasure. Thanks, Tony. This is the straightforward answer is too much information isn't a great thing on the CV, because by I think halfway through the third page, it becomes a little bit difficult to absorb it. So my advice to people is, if you can, keep the information to 2 pages. Now that's a massive sweeping generalization, and also I've had really healthy debates with people about this. I've got some excellent colleagues who are real top performers who disagree with me quite passionately on that. So that's just my personal opinion. I think if you have been a career interim and you've got 10 different assignments, if you think about how an interim CV would read, and it's a personal statement that says, I'm an interim, loud and clear, this is what I do, this is what I do. There's no reason why the last 2 assignments, you'd have them running in date order, couldn't have a little bit of detail. And then the other 10, you just outline what you've done, and you just have the title on there. And then on the back page, or maybe on the final half of the back page, if it takes up that much room, you just, again, really brief summary of your executive career. You don't need to talk about the role that you did when you were finance director in a food business 15 years ago in great detail on your CV. People will know. People, if they see finance director on your CV 15 years ago, they'll get it. They're more interested in the more recent stuff. And then just to repeat what I said before around case studies and references, if you get the highlights of the recent things that you were doing and some good information there, and then the rest of the interim roles, a good interim provider, if they've got time, because it could be that the CV needs to go the second they put down the phone to you, but a good interim provider, if you're working in partnership with them, will want to send that CV, but also some case studies that back up the assignments that you've done. So the CV itself doesn't need to be too busy, and it's quite easily digestible. And then you've got case studies and references which put integrity behind what it is that you're saying you can do. So don't have it too busy, don't have it too long. They can get a little bit hard to read after 2.5 pages.
Yeah, thanks, Laurence. Anthony, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of what Laurence has said is very accurate. I mean, my view on a CV, and I think Laurence is right. What I say to what he says to Alison, to others, will vary greatly. I mean, I think the main acid test for a CV, in my view, is if you're getting invited to interview, your CV's working. So if you're then not getting the job, it's your interview technique that needs working on. So the CV is your sales document. I think have it as long as you like, but be aware that only page 1 and 2 will get read. I think there's all sorts of analysis that's been done into tracking eye movement when people have read CVs, and they go to key areas. And I think your most recent job, your key achievements, a bit of the kind of the profile piece that you put around you and your style. So an interim CV needs to be very evidence and outcome focused. So really impactful stuff about what you've done elsewhere, but take the time to tailor it to the client, because you will have a wealth of experience in your career. You'll have 100 things that you've done. Not all of them will be that relevant to this client. So make sure you put them front and center. So your profile, key achievements, and tailor those key achievements to the exact requirements of the job. And that's where I'd also use the recruiters, try and highlight those key priorities. And then, as Laurence says, I think beyond the last 5 to 10 years, going into detail is just not useful. I often kind of work on the basis of kind of, as you go further back in the CV, the less detail you provide, to the point where it's just dates, organisation, job title. And I'd probably say that, beyond 3 years, 4 years, that's probably relevant. But you're also going to have jobs that you've done in between jobs that aren't relevant to this one. So I think just make sure it's tailored to the client that you're going for on this occasion.
Okay, thanks, Anthony. Alison, do you have anything to add?
I think the only thing that I would add is, within the finance space that I operate, quite a number of our interims have what I would call a more business as usual CV, and then a change CV, depending on the type of role that they're applying for, which is quite helpful. And then again, sort of just reiterating what Anthony said is, the worst thing is when you get a CV and it's just like a shopping list of responsibilities. All you want to see is where that individual has added value and made an impact. So focus on those areas rather than just the core responsibilities of the role.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Alison. Perhaps you could kick off with the next question, because it's a kind of continuation on the theme, really, in a sense. Somebody's asking about describing the content or a template for a typical case study. Yes, Alex. Sorry, Alison. Yes, yeah. I beg your pardon. Yeah.
So, I mean, typically, being honest, we in the finance team, we don't tend to do as many case studies. I know our business transformation and technology team do a lot. I mean, personally, again, being transparent, I'm probably more an individual that would send a CV and references rather than a case study. So maybe Laurence is probably better placed to answer this one.
Okay, well, let's go to Laurence then on Alison's recommendation.
I was, yeah, I agree on the references front. They're absolutely vital. We have a very, very straightforward template that we use, but it isn't mandatory. People don't need to use the consulting group template. You can create your own, and it's as simple as this: headline, and if you can say the company, that's better. But if not, the industry, and then what was the challenge? It really is this simple. What was the challenge? What was your plan and solution? What was the outcome? Just go through the three gateways, and then again, if you can, at the bottom, just if needs be, copy and paste your recommendation from LinkedIn from the CEO that you did a good job for. But just at the bottom, a recommendation from the individual, your client, saying, Go Blogs was brought in. We had this problem. They got to grips with it. They did this. They did that. This was the result. Wouldn't hesitate to use them again or recommend them. So, and that is just a really nice, neat case study that, and if you can have 3 or 4 of those that you can lean on, it just reinforces how worthwhile it is for that client to meet you.
Thank you. Okay, Anthony, anything to add?
Yeah, the only thing I'd probably add to that, one of the things I expect we will see is over the course of the next few months, as the furlough scheme comes to an end, which both Alison and Laurence have commented on, I think we're going to a wave of interims come to the market, and you know, I'm actually a believer that, you know, just because you've stepped out of a permanent role doesn't mean you can be a good interim. I think you can have all the skill sets to do it, and we've got to take the time to understand that. But I think for established interims, to make sure that you're not undercut by people that are willing to just put themselves forward to jobs at low rates, I think references are hugely important. I think they give the extra confidence to clients that you've delivered previously, and I think are really useful to reinforce how you've done that. So yeah, always request them, and whether your recruiter does it at the end of the assignment on your behalf or whether you do that for yourself, they will be integral to making you stand out against others moving forward. So spend the time to get them and request them from recruiters. There's no reason why we shouldn't be willing to share them with you.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Right, another question is referring back to the comments being made about the private equity community earlier, who apparently have loads of money and they're itching to do all sorts of wonderful things. So the question from John actually is, how do you build a network in private equity? And are there any organisations, for example, that you can sensibly go to help? So perhaps Alison, if you'd like to have a go, because they're quite financially oriented, aren't they? Yeah.
So I personally do quite a lot of work supporting different size PE houses, and I mean, frustratingly, there isn't probably one rule of thumb that you can do to start that network. Depending on the PE house, they may have their own talent team. So often they are the individuals that get sight of all the opportunities across the portfolio companies, and they are managing it from that central function. So you can always look at the PE house's own website and it will tell you who they are, and they typically are titled sort of talent director. But often as well, on the flip side, what you'll find is whilst there might be a talent director, each company, the CEO and their own CFO will obviously want to go off and do their own recruitment. So it doesn't always work as it should do. Now, there are particular recruitment firms that only specialise in private equity. So you could obviously connect with them. So my recommendation would be try and get to know a couple of those recruitment firms that only do PE, but then also start to try and get contact directly with the PE houses. And again, a PE house, a lot of them have, some may focus purely on different sectors. Some of them are more focused on turnaround of distressed, some are only growth companies. So again, it's depending on what skill set is to be very specific and align it against that fund.
Okay. And as a starting point, I suppose if people want to find out about a centre for private equity houses, where do you find them? People can always go to the BVCA, the British Venture Capital Association website, where there's great long lists of them, that kind of thing, as a starting point.
Yeah, definitely. And if anyone wants to, feel free to get in contact with me afterwards and we can have a further chat on the type of funds we support, etc. Yeah,
that's very kind offer, thank you. Laurence, have you got anything you'd like to add?
Well, to echo Alison's point, it's quite tricky to have an exact strategy with them. So it's all well and good us saying, look, get networked with PE, and then, oh, actually, it's quite hard to get networked with them. But there are different things that you can do. I think I would absolutely encourage you to do a little bit of research online for which private equity funds are invested in your sector, and again, link the company's websites are pretty specific, and you can see what's in their portfolio, and then you can also have a little look on LinkedIn and see who the investment directors and partners are. Contact them. They're prolific networkers as well. Another thing is ask your interim service provider if they work with private equity. We do. Not as it's not our only route to market, but about 25% of our work came from private equity, directly from private equity last year, and then I don't know what the percentage is actually beyond that, but I know that there was quite a significant chunk in addition to that the PE backed. We were just working with the board instead of the private equity fund themselves. But the more research that you can do, and the more digging that you can do, and send out some notes, approach these people on LinkedIn, or if you've got a good close relationship with an interim provider, ask them to do a campaign with you, and ask them to send your CV. You're unlikely to get resistance if you are relevant to that PE fund. I'll happily do it if I've got somebody outstanding who's done great things in manufacturing. And I work with maybe 10 private equity funds that I've got good relationships with. I will happily broker an introduction. It sometimes doesn't go anywhere. Sometimes it leads to a coffee. And one of the other things that we do is we also host dinners. Just every quarter we have dinners with some of our private equity clients, and we'll invite specific individuals that the PE fund have asked us to bring along. So it could be CEOs from the manufacturing industry. It could be CFOs from the food industry. It really depends who they want there. So just again, ask your interim service provider who they partner with and how can they be introduced.
I'm conscious of my time here, and I've still got some questions to try. I'd like to try and get through. Anthony, have you got anything to add to that particular one before I move on?
No, I mean, we don't really do any work with private equity, being public sector focused, so no real value to add there, sorry.
Yeah, okay. I've got a quick question which hopefully will generate some short answers. What's the current situation for turnaround, and where is it going, please? Alison, you're smiling a lot on that one. How would you like to answer that?
I think going into this next couple of months, this is really going to be the time that businesses that obviously are in crisis are now really looking at their plans into next year and that turnaround piece. So, and also it's a time where maybe the existing leadership team are not the right people to take them through that next phase in their journey if they are in a turnaround. Mm-hmm. So I think our prediction as a firm is that moving into literally the next couple of months and into the new year, that we will see it getting a lot busier in that space.
Okay, right. Anthony, do you get involved at all with turnaround in your neck of the woods?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, there's clearly been a lot of pressure put onto the public sector over the course of the last 6 months. And, firstly, for anyone that works in the public sector, we're hugely admirable and thankful for the incredible work that you've done in the last 6 months to keep people safe and healthy and safe. So, there's financial pressures coming down, be it on local authorities or health bodies, and that will continue. The cost of services increasing. COVID's not gone anywhere yet. We've got winter coming, and as a result of that, there is going to be increased pressure, and organisations are going to be in financial difficulty. Mm-hmm. They are all regulated, be it CQC, Ofsted, so they will also find that they fall under those inspection regimes again, and that will require turnaround and improvement. So, definitely there is going to be a huge drive for improvement and turnaround across the public sector.
Okay, thank you for that. So Anthony's reminded us winter is coming, Laurence. Is that going to be the case in the manufacturing and engineering areas as well, do you think?
Crystal ball stuff, Tony. So
I've got one behind me if you want to borrow it.
Give it a shake. We middle of March, if not to put too fine a point on it, that's kind of that's certainly when we closed our offices. My first day working from home was March the 18th, and then I think we went into kind of the hard lockdown the following weekend. And in the aftermath that followed, there seemed to be a real flurry, particularly from our private equity clients and also from the individuals to turnarounds and distressed specialist CFOs. We were noticing quite a lot of activity and quite a lot of interest, and then it all just seemed to bubble down and sort of settle down. And a lot of this is because we're in this kind of pseudo socialist state right now, where everything's kind of nicely propped up. Just to echo what's already been said, I think the need for turnaround speciality, if there ever was going to be a time when these individuals could come to the fore and help businesses, is going to be in November, or certainly December, January, as we start to see when the tide goes out and you see who's swimming without trunks on.
Yes, and not necessarily an edifying thought. Right, okay. I'd like to try and squeeze in one or possibly two more questions. One more is going back to the shape of interim assignments. The question is, are all interim roles 5 days a week that you get involved generating, or do you have scope for 4 days or less, sort of so-called fractional interim?
All of the above.
All the above. Anthony?
Yeah, I'd agree on that. I mean, I think it comes down to individual preference, but pitch your solution as you see fit, and clients are going to be more happy to pay for 3 days rather than 5 if you can still get the job done. So yeah, I'd agree with that.
Okay, Alison?
Yeah, I would agree. And I'd also say that during lockdown, we've seen an increase in appetite for more part-time opportunities.
Yeah, okay.
From client.
Fine. So we can summarise saying that the market is in fact quite flexible and adaptable. The opportunities there if people want to work less than 5.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got perhaps we might need to make this the final question. I'm very conscious of time, but I'm desperate to extract maximum value from the three of you while I've got you all here. and that is, are you seeing any impact or requirements from the new insolvency moratorium legislation intended to help COVID-19 struggling firms, otherwise normally healthy, from going into administration or directly to insolvency? So a bit of a long question, but have you seen any impact of that or requirements coming from clients yet? Laurence? No?
No,
Anthony,
that's a great question.
I don't see too much administration and insolvency in the public sector happening, but nothing?
No, I mean, there's obviously talk of local authorities going bankrupt, but there'll be state and government intervention. So no, that's not something I can comment on.
Not your show. And Alison, what about you?
No, we haven't seen anything yet, but obviously it could happen as we move into next year when more businesses, unfortunately, are going to move into that state.
Yeah. Okay, one final one, which you might want to give me a quick shot at. What are the panel's views on the trends on rates?
Good question. I'm quite happy. So what we're seeing is, because there are unfortunately more people struggling to secure roles, individuals are contacting us saying that they're prepared to be flexible and lower their expectations, but we are not seeing it yet from the client side. So the advice that we are currently giving is sort of stand firm on your day rates, or if you are willing to budge, not by much.
Okay, Laurence?
I echo the advice. We have seen in manufacturing, we've continued to trade okay, but we're nowhere near as busy as this time last year, naturally. Leadership positions, the CEO, the CFO, the MD, have been okay. A small erosion. Through the lens of manufacturing, the operations director, the chief operating officer, head of ops, those sorts of things. Yeah, we've seen about 20% erosion in there. Every single client will say, yeah, look, we're strapped for cash. This individual won't be inundated with opportunities. It's more than zero a day. It's because these are quite these are quite hard-nosed, gritty businesses that see an opportunity to get good people in at a slightly lower rate. So we are we're having to navigate our way around that, and successfully so far, but it has been a challenge in the manufacturing industry.
Okay. And Anthony, perhaps from the public sector perspective, you might give us a view inside, outside IR35 implications as well, from experience.
Yeah, well, I was going to say more than happily, but I suppose it's probably not that happy. I think we've been dealing with IR35 in its new state existing within the public sector for a couple of years now. I for one was prophesizing the end of the world for the interim market in the public sector when we first started talking about this. The reality, it's balanced out and probably won't be what people want to hear in the short term, but we had interims do a number of things. Some that said, I will never work inside IR35. We had others that said, I will go back into permanent employment. And then we had those that said, well, I work inside IR35, but I now need £1 million a day. Strangely, those wanting £1 million a day didn't find any work. The people that were flexible and adaptable, that said, well, this is my inside rate, this is my outside rate, managed to find work. And I think interim's always been very different in terms of the employment model, because it's about supply and demand. So if you've got a set of skills that are in high demand and there's not much supply, you can charge more. And we've seen that in the public sector. There's always a limit in the public sector to what people will be willing to pay and what they can stomach in the public eye. But I think we've seen downward pressure on rates as more people have become interims and they've been willing to take lower rates. We'd probably say that if you're inside IR35 versus outside, that there's probably going to be a £150, £200 a day difference. Typically it'll equate to about, we'd normally say it equates to the 17.1% employers' NICs that you'd end up paying if you were going through your company. So that's the main difference. And we've seen clients generally become a little bit more savvy and a bit more willing to look at how to structure briefs to get the right person at the best possible price. So I think there will be pressure on rates in the next few months. I think it will be wise to be considerate of what you can take on, but equally know your worth. With IR35, make sure that it's still financially viable by the time that you've lost probably 50% to tax, and then any travel, accommodation costs, etc., need to be taken into account. So yeah, there will come a point where you say, I just can't do it at that rate, and you walk away. But usually recruiters will advise you on what clients are willing to pay, what we think they should pay, and generally what the market can sustain.
Right. I think that's a good place, a rational and realistic place to close out on. So I'd really like to thank all three of you for such a great session today. It's been extremely insightful and informative, and done with good grace and help. So thank you so much for that. As a reminder, everybody on the call will receive an email link to the recording in a few days when we've managed to do the topping and tailing of it and get it onto the YouTube site. And lastly, as most of people here I'm sure will know, the IIM is run by interims for interims, and we're always looking for volunteers to get involved. So if you're